backstage.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to part 1, the 50K book club. We are going to do a live book club with a celebrity guest every time and some folks who want to ask questions and participate. This first session is my boys, the SlingshotEdge boys, Calum and John. What's up, gentlemen? How you doing?
Very good,
Keenan. We're delighted. We even have tartaned up our little friends here. Sorry, plaided up.
Sorry, we're going to get in the spirit of things early on.
Oh, red plaid! Yes. Look, yeah. we've got a little Scottish sales guy connection with the red plaid. I should have put my red plaid on. If I had it in front of me, I'd do it.
This is the Keenan family. It's the Keenan family tartan. We're wearing it with pride.
I wore the right shirt to the podcast or to the show today, of course.
Brian got the memo.
Looking good.
I'm loving it.
We've been swatting up. Rereading. It's been a pleasure to reread.
Really? And, tell me about that pleasure to reread.
Well, I don't want to compliment you too much, Keenan, because I think you got a lot of compliments in your life.
No, it was all right. It was okay.
It was all right. We got through it. No.
Yeah.
I actually forgot how much, because I read it the first time 3 years ago or more. It was just a draft that you sent to us, and we were flying over for 12 hours.
We were going to China at the time. I've still got the draft on my iPad. I've got a draft copy on the iPad here.
But reading the real one, a few differences actually. But it just reminded me how much you loved it, and it's totally aligned with all the things we talk about every day with our customers. So you're kind of preaching to the converted.
Yeah, it struck a chord. I don't know about the rest of the guys on the call, but I think the way it was written as well, it's very conversational. The way that you write is like the way you would speak, which is great because it's very easy to get absorbed and kind of brought into it. It was a right page turner, but I thought it was very conversational, and I think it outlines the psychology. It's the psychology of what's going on in the B2B world and the big challenges. And you kind of pick up on this pretty early. I think it's in chapter 1, really, the rules, where you talk about, fundamentally, it's about selling change. That's the big thing that sellers are faced with. They're trying to sell change, and we hate change as human beings. We've got a natural gravity towards the status quo. So it's not easy. It's not easy to sell change. But I think if you can get your head around that and get your head around the fact that people don't want to change, then, that's a good place to start.
But the thing that hit it home to me was when I started one of my big serious jobs in sales, on the first day, it was a founder-led company. On the first day, the founder said, right, there's the product. Calum, learn everything you can about that product. I want to see a demo. I want to see you doing a demo 2 weeks from now, and it has to be fantastic. And nobody mentioned anything about change to me. They just said, make sure you know how brilliant that product was. And I did. I stupidly did as the guy told me. But that's been undone now, thankfully.
Yes. Thankfully. Very well. Very well. So I'm glad that after a reread, it still, passes your test. So with that, let's introduce our other players here. I'm going to call them players. Our other participants, our book club geniuses. So this is Brian Thomas. Raise your hand, Brian.
Hey, it's Brian.
Ready? And then in the middle is the lovely Emma Scott. Hello, Emma.
Hello.
Hello. And then at the end here is my man, Ted Lain. What's up, baby?
Hey, good to see you.
Beautiful. So for those of you who are watching, listen, if you have questions, if you want to participate, just put them into the chat. I will read them and share them here. But guys, this is just a book club. Like we're just here we should probably do it on Fridays at 5 and be drinking at the same time, like my boys in their whiskey there. But this is just, let's just talk about what you think, what your takeaways were, what your concerns were, challenges, etc. It's in the first 6 chapters, starting with, know the game and that football story where I lost the football game. Like that was emotional because I'm still talking about it 42 years later. All right. So Emma, talk to us. What are your questions? What are your takes? What are your thoughts here?
I think it's very insightful. I'll be interested to see what other people have taken from it. But yeah, it comes down to change, doesn't it? How do you affect change?
And what do you do, Emma?
So I enterprise sales. I now work in sales in social housing, so public sector.
Wow. And do you still sell?
Yeah, I'm still selling. Yeah, so software.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So financial software.
Okay. And so how has gap selling, if at all, changed the way you sell it, or what part of the first chapter impacted you the most?
I think that's difficult to say. I thought it was all very good, but yeah, it just goes back to this change, doesn't it?
It does. It does. All right. So, Ted, what do you think? What are your thoughts? You jump in, baby.
Yeah. So we started on this journey after someone recommended gap selling to us, and it has been a game changer. So after I got done listening to it, because I think this is an absolutely fantastic book to listen to on Audible, I had our CEO read the book and completely changed how we approach sales, because it's not about us. It's all about finding the gaps. And we are transforming not only our bank, but we're also using this to give out to business owners that maybe are struggling to figure out how to improve sales. Because there's a lot of small business owners, they've never read anything like this. They've always thought it's about them, and it's not. So, just knowing the game, it's all about finding the gaps.
Now, guys, I love it. My head will get bigger and bigger. But this isn't just about to sit there and tell me how great I am, how the book is. So Brian, when you read the first 6 chapters, right, what jumped out at you? What did you find to be interesting or challenging or even something you disagree with that didn't make sense for you?
Yeah, so when I read Gap Selling 2 years ago for the first time, and so for me, at the core, I felt like I aligned with it a lot, but I didn't have a handbook or a guide to show me how to execute it. And so the biggest thing that it helped me realize is that most companies, they overcomplicate their process and their strategy, and that, like your example with the, football, example in the beginning of the book, oftentimes your coach might not be able to give you the best instructions, right? And you have to own that as an individual contributor. And one of the things that was a huge takeaway for me and that was really empowering when I read the book is it's like, hey, no, Brian, you're in control, right? Like if you own this and you figure out how to, execute your process and dial in your process, you're going to do extremely well. And I think a question I have for you too, because I feel that a lot of people that read Gap Selling are going to be in this situation, right? They're going to work at companies where it's just like Calum was talking about, where they're going to tell you to demo the product first, and it's all about your product, right? And so you find yourself in a company, right? And this is what happened to me, right? When I read Gap Selling, I was at a company where they asked us to demo first, right? BDRs are setting meetings for demos, right? They're asking us to set demos, not discovery calls. And so, I had my own challenges in kind of like helping move the organization that I was at the time, Open Space, towards a more of a discovery first mindset, where previously they did demo first. I'm curious, what's your advice for someone that might pick up Gap Selling, might start reading it and realize, oh, wow, my organization is not on this page. How can that person start to kind of implement or change the organization they're in?
Twofold. It's easy in my little opinion. Twofold. One, become an expert and start crushing it with the numbers, right? The numbers don't lie. And then 2, give like Ted did, give a book to the powers that be. Find the most influential person in leadership, whether it's a manager or a director or the CRO, whoever's most influential, and give it to them. And then, right? Or look, so I'm sure you've done this, Brian, so don't take this personally, but this is a message to the whole wide world, and it's slightly off topic, then we get back on topic. And this is me getting old, like I'm 53 in fucking April, and I swear to God, now I know where the grumpy old man concept came from, because you live life long enough, you get fucking grumpy. And what I get grumpy at is how many people don't know how to take care of themselves. Like, I want to wring people's fucking necks, right? Like, if you buy a book and you realize, oh my God, this is a great book, this could change things in the organization. How about do your own book club? How about say, hey, Tom, Mary, Jennifer, Paul, this is great. You guys should read this. We should do a book club once a week. We might be able to make some changes. We could sell more. No, nobody knows how to do that. They just sit back and like, what do I do? How do I make change? No one's going to help me out. Fucking take a control of your own life. You said it earlier, Brian. So anyways, enough rant. I just get so upset watching people let their lives go away because they just don't have the will, the desire, or wherewithal to just do what's obvious. Just fucking do it. Just make the change yourself. But anyways, I digress. So that's what I do. Start a book club, tell people about it, and then buy the book for the smart people like Ted did. Oh my God. Anyways, okay. Anyways, I'm back. So
well, I'm lucky. I'm at a company now where we all basically, if you join Applied Software, you have to buy gap. I mean, we don't but it's pretty much a requirement. I mean, it's everyone reads gap selling when it works. So very lucky. Yeah.
Now we got to get you guys to take the training. So anyways, I digress. Okay, so boys, let's talk about this, right? In the first chapter, I talk about how I lose a football game, and then I talk about how people don't understand the game, and then I talk about this idea of it's not that people can't sell us, they can't diagnose. What do you guys think about that? What do you think the rules have changed the most when it comes to sales?
So there's two for me, two principles in this book that stand out loud and clear. One is you're selling change, and to get people to change, it's not easy. We've said that at the start. You're trying to get someone to move from the status quo. Listen, there's a reason people don't like to change. We can go into the science, but there's a survival advantage for clinging on to the status quo, and we can talk about that later. But ultimately, you're right. The reason that most sellers fail to sell change is because of discovery. That they are not discovering enough information during that discovery phase, enough information that aligns with the buyer's motivation to really change. So diagnosing the problem, again, I think it goes back to how most organizations work. They don't do that because they're product focused. And I think Brian was kind of picking up on his past experience. When you start a new organization, most onboarding training that you get is all about your product. It doesn't address or look at your buyer's world, okay? It doesn't start with who are we trying to help? What does a day in the life look like for these people? What motivations, what struggles do we think they could be suffering? It's all about the product. So you have this mindset as a seller, which is particularly bad as a young salesperson, that the right thing to do is just go in there and start talking about your product without really trying to understand where your buyer is today. And I think you pick up on this as well. You say that most of the motivation to change comes from the current state.
Yep.
It's the impact of doing nothing. I can think back to my own life. Probably the biggest turning point for me 17 years ago that pushed me into sales was at the time. Well, I was an engineer. I've been an engineer for 10, 15 years, and I loved it. Did I want to make more money? Absolutely, but I was quite happy. But then my boss's boss took a big dislike to me for some reason, and it became.
I don't believe that for a second.
I mean, come on, right?
I believe it.
And it became quite toxic. It was tough, right? And I remember at the time it got to the point we had a big, massive argument, and I walked out. Anyway, long story short, I was off work for 4 or 5 months just trying to sort my head out. I went through a pretty dark period. And I was thinking, I can't go back there. I cannot go back to that job. And at the time in Scotland, the electronics industry was dying a death. There was no opportunities. So what do? Well, you have to change, right? I had to change, but it was a risk. I took a graduate sales job on a graduate salary, making a lot less money to start with. I had 3 young kids, and I was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm fucked, right? But I had no option. But if you had came to, this is the point for sellers, if you had came to me 2 years before that and said to me, John, I'm going to sell you a career change, this fantastic new career as a salesperson, you might have to take a pay cut initially, but you can earn more commission. I would have went, nah, you're fine. I'm okay right now. I'm doing all right. And actually all these things that you're promising me, well, they might never transpire. I might not make the commission. I might suck at sales. Yep. And it's the same psychology at play in the B2B world. That's where your prospects are. They don't want to change, and they won't change unless the status quo becomes uncomfortable enough. And if you're not doing discovery, if you're not diagnosing what's wrong with what they're doing right right now, today, and making them feel uncomfortable and invoking those emotions, this is no decision. You're just heading to no decision. So diagnosis, you've got to spend more time in the current state. And if it's not uncomfortable enough for your buyer, they will not change.
Yep. In the book, go.
I was just going to pick up on some of the things that Ted said about giving the book to some of these business owners, because often business owners and founders are the worst criminals when it comes to scaling their company. They do what my boss did, learn the products. It's amazing. I want to see you do a fantastic demo. But so they don't want to do that. But these business owners and founders, they probably really do understand their buyer's business because they had to understand that to develop the product.
Yeah.
So they really do have business acumen, but it's almost like they've forgotten that, or they just assume that everyone else has this business acumen. So you hear lots about, the young sellers don't have any business acumen. Well, it's it's not dead easy, but it's quite easy to get that business acumen. Just dig into your buyer's current state, and suddenly their minds are flooded with business acumen. So that's a fantastic thing that you guys are doing, Ted.
Thank you. So great job, Ted. Great job. So in the book on page 11, I lay out these bunch of reasons that salespeople say they can't close deals, right? The prospect went dark. How many times have you heard that one, right? There was competition we didn't know about. Our price was too high. The deal didn't close when it was supposed to. After 8 months, the prospect made no decision and kept to the status quo. No one returned my calls. I couldn't get access to the decision makers. Oh, God, that one kills me. The prospect kept leading me on but wouldn't commit. We didn't have all the features the buyer needed. They told us we won the deal but then changed their mind. I have a crappy territory. The leads are bad, right? Good old Glengarry. But the leads are bad. What are you doing? Get coffee. Sit down. Coffee's for closest. Right? The competition has advantages I don't, right? I mean, have we not heard all of these excuses?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And what causes those, though? That's what I think is interesting. Where do most of these excuses or problems come from?
I feel like oftentimes it does just come down to, like you say, it's the impact, right, that your solution has on the gap that the customer has, right? And if they don't have that gap, then the reality is that, all of those symptoms of a bad deal are going to come about, right? Whether it's the gap doesn't exist or the impact that your product has isn't impacting their gap, right? All of a sudden they're going to ghost you, or they're not going to. And I feel like it all kind of starts really at the beginning. And just like you all said, right, it's uncovering that information and understanding what do we have here. And I really do think, a good salesperson in the first, depending on what you're selling, of course, and the average sales cycle, in the first 15, 30 minutes, if you're talking to the right-ish people, maybe we don't always have access right off the bat, but if you're talking to the right people, you're going to know, I feel like oftentimes you're going to be able to ask the right questions and figure out, is there something here, or am I going to be chasing this person the whole time?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Yep.
When I look at the deals that I've lost, and I've lost a few over the last 15, 20 years, believe it or not, but you can all, I've been awarded preferred supplier after a 12-month procurement process, big multi-million-dollar projects. I got the phone call, preferred supplier, and 5-6 weeks later I was doing a loss call. They were telling me they weren't going to change, and I'd missed it. I'd missed this. This is information I'd missed in discovery. I didn't truly understand their motivations. I knew where they wanted to get to. I knew what the future state looked like, but I did not know the impact of the status quo. If they didn't do a thing, what was the worst that was going to happen? And that's a great discovery question, by the way. If you don't change, what's the worst that's going to happen? Because if the impact isn't big enough, and it's a big change, and this was a big change, process, people, technology, they're not going to change. And I didn't ask that question at the start. I assumed they were going to change, and they were going through an evaluation process to pick the best vendor, the best supplier. I could have saved a lot of time, a lot of heartache and discovery, having that conversation right at the start. And it all goes back to discovery, I think.
Yeah. your question there, Keenan, about where do these excuses come from or why do they exist? For me, there's two reasons. And number one reason is actually the title of your first chapter, which is Know the Rules of the Game. So they don't know the rules of the game. They don't know. They imagine they tell themselves stories about why things are not working. But if they actually knew, the reasons why people change and why they stick to the status quo and the fact that everything's emotional and it's the impact that's going to make them change, the impact to do nothing is going to make them actually change, and it's the root cause that's actually going to direct them towards you. If they understand all these rules, then they're less likely to make these excuses. But the other thing is, and I don't know if this is a bad generalism about salespeople, or maybe it's about human beings in general, is we're all insecure, or many people are insecure and are afraid to admit responsibility to this thing not working. I tell my kids basically two things as they're growing up. One, take responsibility, whatever it is, whatever the problem is that you're involved in, just take responsibility and you'll get much more respect. And the second bit of advice I give them is smilers get everything, whiners get nothing. Maybe that applies to sales as well.
Parenting 101. I love that.
There's two things. I don't want to jump into part 2 of the book, but there's knowing what to discover. And I think that's where a lot of sellers fall down. They don't know what they're trying to discover. And you set out. So that's one thing. What am I trying to discover here? And then there's knowing how to discover it. So they're two different things. Knowing what to discover and how to discover it are two different things. And it's hard, right? It's not easy. I mean, I don't know how you found implementing, how you found your customers have got on implementing gap selling. But just because I know what I'm looking for, getting that information is another challenge, because at the start of that sales process, it's very likely that you don't know me and you don't trust me as a salesperson, because there's a stereotype bias that triggers in your head. And you don't want to sit there and answer all my questions and expose yourself to me at the start of the process. So I think problem number 1 is what to discover. And then problem number 2, which you probably pick up on later, is how you're going to discover that without it sounding like an interrogation.
And when it comes to, I was just going to say, when it comes to training people as well, because I feel that I'm really lucky in that what I sell, I was actually in that industry before I started selling. So in construction, so that makes it a lot easier for me personally. But when you're looking at bringing on someone that maybe doesn't have industry experience, right? Like Calum was saying, there's a difference between knowing how to act, like the methodology of identifying the gap and how we can impact that, versus industry knowledge and being able to understand what are the gaps we can solve. And I'm curious, from that perspective, is there a way or like a framework or a methodology you use, whether it's consulting or at your own business, when you're trying to kind of educate your salespeople on industry knowledge so they can identify gaps?
So yes, so that's going to be SEC part 2. So stay tuned. But the quick answer I'll give you is talk to your buyers. So go back to the people who already bought your product or service, and then give them and say, hey, what was it like before you bought XYZ? What were you struggling with? So before you bought our software, so I think Emma said she's in public housing software or something. So before you bought our software, what was killing you? What couldn't you do? What was driving you mad? What was frustrating? Right? And then how is life now that you bought our software? What's gone? What doesn't exist? How has your life changed? There it is right there. Like they experienced the gap, right? Before I'm not married, but before I married my lovely wife, I was lonely and in despair and didn't think I was worth anything and blah, blah, blah. And now that I've met her, I'm happy and I'm not suicidal anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like it just, they went through it.
But you've described something there that a lot of sellers, I don't think, get, Keenan. You've described 2 different emotional states. You've described 2 emotional states. You used words like, I was happy, I'm now happy, I was suicidal before. I think sometimes when sellers think about a gap, they think purely in business metrics.
Yes, biggest mistake. Very good observation. Biggest mistake.
So that's it. You've got to talk the buyer's language.
Yeah, and they don't tap into the emotional state. And we know that that's where the change change is driven through emotion. The sale is an emotional thing. And often you hear sellers talking about future states, but what do they talk about? It's a banal generic value proposition. Save money, save time, reduce risk. There's nothing around the context of the buyer and the human beings and the emotional angle within those value propositions. And I think that's an important point. This is very much about contrasting emotional states. That's where the value lies.
1 second, I want to do a quick public announcement. So all of those who are listening, listen up. If you got a question for anyone here, if you have a question in general, put it into the comments. Let me know you're here. And I'm going to pick anybody who leaves a comment. I'm going to pick randomly someone out of here and get you either a free copy of the book. So comment, share, engage, people, and don't be voyeurs. And I'm going to give away a free autographed copy of the book. So who's here? And also share. Everybody put a comment in here and tag somebody that should be watching this for the next half hour. Ready, go. Okay, so I interrupted. Ted or Emma, you guys jump in.
So I was just going to jump in here. If you don't know an industry, you got to spend some time researching it, really understand what you're walking into. Spend some time thinking about how you want to lead that discussion with the owner of the business or the senior executive team. Think through who, what, why, where, and have a process thought through. So one of the things we teach here at the bank is you use the cash operating cycle. How does money come in? How does money go out of the company, right? There's a process. Every company has money come in, money go out, right? Use that process to lead the discussion, and you'll start to find gaps. It's not about talking about us. It's about understanding that business. And at least in financial services, we need to know how money flows through a business, through balance sheet and income statement.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Emma?
Sorry, what's the question? I was just thinking about what you were saying.
That's okay. I'll go to a new one.
No, because for me, I've completely changed industry. So I was in HR, transformation. I've now gone into public sector. I don't think you need to know that much about the industry for me, but it's all about it's preparing. So whoever you're talking to, you've got to understand the organisation. It's not the industry; it's the organisation. You've got to put as much prep in as possible.
Okay, that's what's behind that. So the idea that if you know what motivates them, what metrics are important to them, what they're trying to accomplish. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So on page 28, here's a quote. Tell me, guys, what you think about this quote. Closing a sale is about helping customers feel safe enough to lay their defenses down and share their problems, then getting them to a point where they feel secure and confident enough to admit they're ready for change, either to something better or to get away from something painful. They have to come to believe that change will be worth it. But the first part of that, getting customers to feel safe enough to lay down their defenses and share their problems.
Yeah, I think that's the most critical. In my mind, I feel that's the most critical part of sales. That's, in my mind, oftentimes kind of like the magic, where you can get someone that maybe is a little bit colder, or maybe they're really stressed out about their gap and they don't want to reveal all of this information to you. But then that ability to warm them up. And I think there's a million different ways to do that, and I think everyone does it differently. But I think the common thread that your book definitely touches on is keeping their best interests in mind and putting that first, and not putting your product first. And I think, no matter what your style is, if you take that general methodology, people are going to open up when they know that you really actually do care about their business and what's going to happen to them. And I think that's what the foundation of that really is, for me at least.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I would just add that, being a resource for business owners, if they know that you're there for their best interest and you can help them solve problems, they're going to open up. You're going to build that trust because they know and they can sense that you're there to really help them and not just sell them.
So do you think we encourage sellers to do that? Because it's absolutely right. But I mean, when we try and get sellers to align with things like BANT, I know this is one of your favorites, Keenan, where Right? So we're teaching people to do the opposite, right? We're saying, okay, whether it's BANT or MedPick, I don't care, pick a qualification framework. But what we're basically saying to the salesperson is, your job is to qualify that person, right?
Yep.
Not to understand, not to empathize, which you should be doing, because I think that's what you guys are, right? To build trust, you have to demonstrate empathy, which means I understand where you're coming from. I understand your situation. I understand as best as I can how it might be affecting you. But as a salesperson, we're like, no, what you're going to do, SDR, is you're going to ask them these 30 questions and qualify them against a framework. So the first thing you're going to do goes against all of that empathy. You know, it's got nothing to do with establishing trust and building credibility. You're putting the prospect on the witness stand.
Yeah.
How do we address that?
And if I could even sprinkle like a little bit of Gary V into this book club, I do think in selling, right, it can't be a one-way street. You can't give too much and they can't take too much, you know, but in the beginning, I do believe you have to give, right? Like you cannot, as a seller, as a salesperson, as a company, you can't expect to take in the beginning of a relationship, right? So I feel like you're saying with BANT, right? You're just taking, and it's just selfish, right? And then you talk to some sales professionals that have been selling forever, and they're like, no, I'm not going to take that meeting until like they've answered these things, or I know this, that, or the other. Well, it's like, hey, listen, you know, if the opportunity, if it's a customer that's worth potentially having, you know, put the effort in and understand them before you start to try and qualify how much money they have and how quickly they're going to buy. It's just kind of crazy to me.
Completely agree. Couldn't agree more. So when we getting through chapter 2, 9 truth bombs of selling. Anybody want to have any thoughts on that? 9 truth bombs of selling. Do you guys agree, disagree? Did we miss any?
That was one of my favorite parts of the book. I love that relationships don't matter. Like that was one of my favorite things that you said, because I feel like so many veteran salespeople that I've worked with have just harped on that, right? They're like, relationships matter, and it's like they just don't, right? And then those people, you know, I hate to say this, like humble brag, I guess, but those same people, right, that I work with, they're like, well, how did you get this customer? I'm like, I cold called him. You just called him and asked? Like, yeah, I like called him, and yes, I called him and asked him, right? And like they don't believe it, right? They don't even understand that that's possible. It's like, if you understand what problems your customers are facing, it's not about relationships. It's just about being able to help them. And so, I loved the 9 truth bombs and the relationship thing, just because it's a little bit inflammatory with some people. I liked that style a little bit. So I love the 9 truth bombs.
I think it's the type of relationship. I think sellers get hung up on this likability thing. I think that's what you were saying, Keenan. Do you have to be liked to sell? And it's not that relationships aren't important. It's the type of relationship. Do I trust you? First and foremost, do I trust you? That trumps likability. And when you talk about challengers, you know, challengers did go in and disrupt the status quo. They didn't care about being liked initially. They're not setting out to get disliked. That's not their aim either. But because they understood the prospects world and brought something to the conversation, I think you pick up, Keenan, don't take your customer's need at face value. You can bring something to the conversation and help them see something they couldn't see. And if you can do that, well, I'm going to trust you because you've revealed something I was unaware of. You know, you've shown me the sinkhole. So it's a relationship, but it's not. Don't get hung up on likability. It's trust and credibility first, I think.
Yeah, the word in the same way as in the book, the word problem is a blunt term. It's a imprecise term, so you've made it more precise by breaking it down into its different constituent parts. In the same way, the word relationship or even friendship is a blunt term. There are many sort of aspects to it, and John just mentioned trust. You know, for someone to be my friend, I have to trust them. For someone to become your buyer, they have to trust you. So there is some commonality. But it's this business of when you become friends with someone, often it's that you've got things in common. You both play golf, or you go to the same bar, or you like the same football team. That's the shit that does not matter, that many salespeople try and grasp for.
Maybe 10 years ago when you were selling to the CEO on a golf course, the sales are too complex now. There's 8, 10 decision makers.
Yeah.
You just can't play that game anymore. That's not how you get consensus.
So things in common doesn't matter shit.
Yeah.
I think you out, by the way, selling on a golf course, 20 years old, not just 10.
20 years old. Yeah,
20.
Exactly.
I remember I remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I must have golfed 15, 20 times a year with clients and then go to dinners and like that. I mean, look, it was fun. Don't get me wrong. Like that was fun work. I'd take a Thursday afternoon and get to go out the golf course. As long as I was making money off that client, they were like spend. I even got to take a client to a Super Bowl game, right? Like that was how you did it back then. Not anymore. They don't want to go. Like they just don't even want. Even if you had it, they don't even want to go. Like I got too much shit to do. I can't play golf with you.
Time is precious.
Absolutely. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I think people get hung up on Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion, and likability is obviously one of those. So they get hung up between likability and, well, he said it's important, but in the B2B complex world, trust and competency are key.
Speaking of relationships, though, internally, when you have to co-sell with other individuals, and maybe, in some roles, oftentimes you have to co-sell with different individuals all the time, right? So you might not be able to build a strong bond with those folks. What would you recommend? I mean, outside of course, having them read gap selling, what would you recommend in terms of kind of aligning those, team members before a call so that they can kind of help adopt the gap selling mindset? And where I come from with that is that in my current role, sometimes, I'll have to deal with someone that's maybe not even part of my organization, and they have to be part of the discovery process because sometimes it can be very technical. What would you recommend as far as like trying to get someone into the gap selling mindset if you only had like 10 minutes to prep them, 10, 30 minutes to prep them for a call?
So I don't think you can get them in the gap selling mindset because it's too much backstory. But what you can do is you can tell them the objective of the discovery and why you're trying to do that, right? So you can say, listen, this call is to find out what's going on. I want to understand what problems they have. I want to understand the issues and challenges they're having in the organization so we can show them how our XYZ product can solve those problems and deliver on the desired outcomes, right? Whatever that stuff is, you have to fill in those blanks. And you say, and here's your role. In that, I'd like you to ask questions in this vein, or I'd like you to help us uncover issues and problems that they might have here technically that I'm not familiar with, right? So that's where your root causes. Look, I know all the business, but I'm really having a hard time understanding some of the root causes around XYZ. Can you ask questions here? Can you dig in here? Can you tell me what types of problems would they be having that would prevent them technically having, that would prevent them from accomplishing Y or being in compliance or whatever the issue is? And can you ask questions there to dig in and turn the knife to make it realize, boy, this is really painful because he just uncovered all these technical issues that are causing us these business problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that does make a lot of sense. I think kind of going one layer deeper than I do now, because one of the things I do now is I provide like a set of questions that I plan on asking. I don't usually go through all of them, but I'll write out some like specific questions for that call based on my research and everything, and I'll get it over to them and also show like, hey, these are the goals for the call. But then I think explaining like, hey, what we're trying to do is get to the point where they can see the pain and then they can also see the impact. So I think maybe taking it an additional step further when I give that document over or whatever before a call.
Here's a mind shift flip, and I'd love the boys' thoughts on this as well. Most people have a hard time thinking about what information they want. They think about the questions to ask. Okay, I don't think that way. My mind thinks is what can I get them to admit? That's how I think, right? So I'm going in saying I want them to admit that their sales team is not focused on the problem, or I want to go in and get them to admit that they have a horrible pipeline review process. I want to go in and get them to admit that their pipeline is growing way too slow. I want them to admit there's only 1 or 2 people in the entire organization that are getting shit done. Like I know going in, I want to get them to admit certain shit. And if I get them to admit that shit, I own you. Now, how I do it, what questions I ask are really immaterial to me. Right? This is a horrible another example, but if I get out of the sales world, it's like I'm a single guy and I really like a girl and I want her to admit certain things. I want her to admit that she's looking for a guy that's a certain way, like me. I want her to admit that the current situation she's in isn't very good. I want her to admit her boyfriend now doesn't treat her well. I want her to admit that she's ready to settle down. Like, I want her to admit shit. And when I get her to admit shit, I win, right? I don't think about the questions. Thinking about the questions gets in the way.
I agree. Totally agree. Keep it simple, right? You're trying to find out one or two key bits of information. How you get to that is different. And the more questions that you write down, the less conversational this is going to be. And that's when people start to go, I'm getting interrogated now. This isn't a conversation. Yeah. I don't want an interrogation. Yeah. So you're trying to get to impact and emotion. I want them to be emotional. I want them to say, yeah, I'm fucking frustrated with this. Yeah. And tap into that emotion. How you get there, as you say, Keenan, for me, it's too you're too rigid. If you're going to write down all these questions, it becomes a rigid exercise. Just think, what's the end game here? Where are we trying to get to? And let the conversation try naturally unfold to get there.
Well, yeah, when you said just think, what's the end game? I imagine when you're in the admit shit methodology, there's a new methodology for you, the admit shit methodology.
That's the next step on the book.
I like that. Yes.
When you're in the admit shit methodology, what is happening is in your brain, you have a number of models. And these models have been built up from your experience of speaking to other people like them. And these models are model root causes. So model typical current states and current processes that people are going through. So you've got these models in your head. And if you see these models, even draw a picture of what these models are, you can start to try and get your customer to admit, or your buyer to admit to buying into some of these models. Or
I think that is into the pick charts, doesn't it?
It's the pick charts.
It's the pick charts where you understand. Again, it's what is a problem? What's the anatomy of a problem? You need to understand that. And that means, well, why does it exist? Root cause. How does it manifest itself at a surface level? So what does it look like from the buyer's perspective? So when you go to the doctor, I've got a headache. I don't use the doctor analogy. I've got a headache, right? It's a symptom. I don't know how big the problem is right now, but I know I'm looking out for that of my doctor. But then what's the impact if it goes untreated? What's the emotional impact around that problem? But you need to understand what the problem looks like as well.
Go on.
No, really quick. I like where you guys are going. Like, look, when you go into a doctor doesn't write down a bunch of questions. A doctor says, I'm looking for this. If you have this, and this, I'm concerned. Hey, my friend, are you having a hard time eating? Yes. Are you losing weight? Yes. Are you shitting really bad? Yes. Right? Say, are you getting lesions on your arm? Yes. Okay. I know what your problem is. Right? You say no to two of those. You say no to two of those. Okay, wait. So it's not this. Let me go over here. So no to these two. Okay, so you have the headaches. You're losing weight. Are you eating this type of food? Yes. Are you doing this? Yes. Okay, I know what the problem is. No, that they go over here because they know what they're looking for. They go in ahead of time, and based on what you tell you, based on the type of doctor that's here in sales. So I sell sales training. You sell sales training. Ted, you sell banking stuff. Emma, you sell software for public housing, right? So each of those are different doctors. As an oncologist, I'm looking for certain cancers. As a brain, as a freaking the stomach, a gastrointestine, I'm looking for certain. Like I know what my lane is, so I don't have to write questions down. I know what to look for, and I go there right away. So I'm with you.
But Keenan, my wife is a doctor, and when I started going out with her, she was studying to become a doctor. So when I say studying, this movement is her studying. when she was studying to become a doctor, and so I didn't really see her that much. But I remember I met her one day, and she was crying, and I said, "Why are you crying?" And she's tough, strong, by the way. Why are you crying? And she goes, I've got an exam in 2 hours, and I have to know all the bones in the wrist and there's something like 79 of them. I have to know what the Latin term is for them all, and what might go wrong with them. So essentially what she was learning, that work back then, was her learning all the possible things that could go wrong in the wrist, if you like. And so she was learning these possible root causes, so that fast forward to today, if someone's got a sore wrist, she's got a picture of the person's wrist inside her head, and she can start trying to look for matches. Get the admit shit methodology. Get the buyer to admit, oh yeah, I've got that problem when I move my wrist in that way.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Ted, what are you thinking?
It's in terms of really thinking through, and this is maybe where we're a little bit different. We cover a lot of different industries, and so just having that kind of broad understanding of how business works, and then being able to really drill down into very specific industry, having that knowledge of how the industry works is really critical when you're interviewing, doing your discovery call, to be able to dive in deep and go into those areas where, if I cover 20 different industries, there's no way I can have the depth of information. And so we've got resources to help us really understand and go deep with, just like being a doctor, right? They know how the wrist works, but now if you got to go look at the foot, well, you've got to have additional information. That's what we have access to.
Emma, you've been quiet.
No, it's really interesting. What I was thinking then is that it's the more you get them to talk, without having this list of questions, it's just going to make the next call a lot easier, because then what you've got real life stories that you can go back to, which you can then talk to your new prospect about. It's all about credibility, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, last one. We're a little over, but that's okay. Last one. Guys, share me your thoughts on the whole concept of the gap in general, right? So you've got the current state, you got the future state, and then you get the gap. And obviously, the bigger the gap, the greater motivation there is to change, the greater impact on the organization if you don't change, the greater potential for return when you do change. What are your thoughts on that? What did you take away from the book on that?
Well, from our perspective, we reference the work of Daniel Kahneman quite a lot. I don't know if you've read Thinking Fast and Slow.
Danny and I go way back. Love Danny.
Yeah. So you hold good company. So Danny won a Nobel Prize for something called prospect theory back in the early 2000s. Prospect theory was essentially a study of how human beings perceive value and how you make decisions with respect to that, with respect to value as well. And Kahneman's model, and the model that he's detailing is called loss aversion. And it really says that human beings care twice as much about avoiding loss than achieving gain. So when you make a decision, when there's uncertainty on the outcomes, you weigh up the potential upside, but you also weigh up the potential downside, but you apply twice as much weight to the downside. So the losses loom larger than gains. But prospect theory, it really details the model of how you perceive value as a human being. He calls it psychological or emotional value. And the amount of value that you get from something, whether it's a purchase, whether it's an experience, it's the difference, it's the contrast between how you felt before versus how you feel after. And the wider the contrast, the wider the gap, the more that human beings, you, me, the more value that we perceive. So for me, this just aligns beautifully with the concept that Kahneman outlines. It's all about the gap. It's the difference between the current state, how that makes you feel, contrasted with the future state, how that makes you, or how that could make you feel. That's where the motivation lies. It's in that gap. That's where the value lies.
And you, to quote you in your book, you say, you've got to uncover their current state and uncover the impact. But I think you use the word something like, don't just let them wallow there. You have to get them also to imagine the emotions associated with the future. And it's only when the two are viewed together. There we go. There's the gap. It's only when the two are viewed together. And this is a good shout out for people that use slides and shit like that. there's no point in having all the slides of all the pain in one slide and then a better place on another slide. Have them both. Here's what you told me, how shit your life is right now, and here's where you told me that you want to go. Have them both in the one slide, because if there's no contrast, there's no value.
So we talk about this chimp quite a lot in our videos, and the different emotional levers and cognitive biases that you can stimulate to really help this chimp, the emotional part of your buyer's brain, the decision maker, how you help it see value. And without contrast, the chimp can't make a decision. It needs contrast to decide safe path versus unsafe path. It needs to see these things side by side, and it can't feel value without contrast either. So if there's no gap, there's no contrast, there's no value.
Keenan, did you not quote Jimmy Carter or someone like that, who got a special vice president who was particularly ugly to make him look good? Was it not one in your book somewhere? You talk about a president whose vice president or right hand person was not very pretty, and the person was chosen specially because it made the other person look good. Maybe have I got the wrong book?
That was Josh Brown.
I think so. I talk about going to see Donald Trump in the book, right? When your brand new Land Rover breaks down. But I don't remember the pretty not pretty.
Okay, I'll find it. That's a challenge to me. I'll find it.
Yes. That's okay.
I've got one question for you, Keenan, because I think it's quite controversial. What you say in chapter 6, when we're talking about the gap here, you say salespeople. I don't have the page number, but I'll give you the quote. Okay. Salespeople can manipulate the size of the gap. Now, a lot of sales trainers stay away from that word manipulation. They don't like to use the word manipulate. What's your thoughts around that? I mean, I'm with you, but a lot of people don't like the idea of any kind of manipulation.
Yes. So notice I said manipulate the size of the gap, not manipulate the person. So what that means is, so I use the pill example, right? The pill that can save your life, right, is an example of that. So what I mean by manipulate the size of the gap, the average salesperson, I do this in my trainings all the time, the average salesperson would have found someone with a migraine headache and got them to say, yep, I can't see and I can't listen to music and my head is splitting and I got to lay in bed and it hurts really bad and this sucks, right? And they'll think they'll have done a great discovery and they'll sell that pill for $5 or $10, right? And say they solved the like, oh my God, they feel so much better. I got out of bed. A good salesperson, that's a bad salesperson. A good salesperson will manipulate the gap and say, well, wait a minute, what do you have to do today? So I know you just said you're stuck in bed and it hurts and you're in a lot of pain and you're miserable, but what do you have to do today? And like, nothing. And they say, well, what do you do for work? And they're like, I'm a salesperson. What do you have to do tomorrow? Like, oh my God, I got a proposal due. So now they get the person realizing that because they can't get out of bed, they can't get that proposal done. Right. So now they start digging into, well, what happens if you don't get the proposal done? How much is it worth? What is the client like? What is your quota? What is your commission on that? How much money you will make? Will it get you to President's Club? So they dig into all of that and they're broadening the gap. And then that good salesperson might sell the pill now for, oh, shoot, I'm making up for, $1,000 because that proposal is worth $50,000 to them. Right. But then a great salesperson will ask even more questions, say, well, where does it hurt? How long have you been having it? Can I take a picture and find out, oh, you've got brain cancer. So fuck getting your proposal done. You got 6 months or you're gone. And are you single or are you 95 years old? Like one of the things I do in my training is I never tell them the person's age. And then at the end, I'm like, who's excited that they're going to save this person's life? And everybody's hands goes up. And I'm like, well, how old is this person? Like, I don't know. I'm like, why did you ask? And like, they're 95 years old. Like, oh. They're not like all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're not going to buy the pill. So great salespeople find out that you're a 42-year-old father of 3 with a thriving business and 3 children that aren't out of school yet. And you've got a whole bucket list and business is just taken off. And you're going to be able to go visit all the places you've always wanted to go. That's manipulating the gap. It's getting you to look at your current environment through a much broader lens. It's not looking at, oh, it sucks, my head hurts, I can't talk, oh my God, this hurts. It's, son, that momentary pain is nothing to what the real issue is. Your shit's going to die in 6 months if you don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to find the value as it's relative to that person, that company.
That's the value. Sorry, keep going, Ted.
Value is relative, right? What might be worth $5 to one company might be worth $50,000 to the next company. You've got to figure out the gap and sell to the gap.
And I would say
what makes great salespeople. Sorry, that's what Ted just said. That's the difference in salespeople that make a lot of money and don't make a lot of money. 95% of salespeople will sell that pill for $5 to $10, never realizing that 3% of every person they sold that pill to was going to die of a brain tumor. Never even knew it. Right? And therefore costing their company millions of dollars in revenue. And costing that person the awareness. Think about that for a second. Costing that person the awareness that they were this close to death. No one wins in that scenario.
And I would say that's my biggest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, once you know the value as relative to the buyer, when you get to that discussion of pricing and they push back and say, well, I don't want to pay that. Okay, well, you figured out what it's worth. It's a pretty easy discussion at that point. I mean, you price it accordingly. It's easy.
And in all honesty, this kind of discussion is my biggest takeaway from gap selling, where you initially, Calum, were talking about manipulation, of the gap, and is that okay, and how do people feel about that, right? I started sales, in New Jersey, selling coupons door to door. I worked for a company called General Steel, selling steel buildings. I worked for a lot of companies that were very old fashioned, right? In the way they sold it was very much them versus the customer, right? And it was you're battling the customer, right? And it's like, and I always knew there was a better way. I knew there was a better way. And it's I feel like what gap selling allows you to do is fight with your customer so that you're fighting the problems they have instead of trying to force your customer into something or what have you. So I feel like that was definitely my biggest takeaway and what really got me excited about it, really.
I love that.
It sounds like that's your personality type. I mean, Keenan, you say in chapter 1, the reason you went into selling was because you love solving people's problems, right? You love making people, you love helping, right? You love to solve problems. And for me, if you've got that mindset, then that's it. That's the mindset. I mean, the best salespeople, I think, have that mindset. A lot of the best salespeople used to be engineers. But, they
I heard that. Yes, and then John, too, is their name.
But it's about solving problems. I almost never went into sales because of the stereotype. I thought I don't want to be that pushy salesperson, but I thought no, it's about solving problems. You're helping someone, and if that's the mindset you've got going in there, then you're going to focus on the current state. You've got to get to root cause. You've got to get to impact to get to solution.
Okay, so I know I apologize. Well, fuck it, I'm not apologizing. LinkedIn did this. LinkedIn did not show any of the comments for the first hour or first 45 minutes. And all of a sudden, boom, they just showed up. And we got a lot of them. So I'm going to ask one question because I thought that was a great one. And I want your guys' opinions on this because it drives me insane. What do you guys feel? I'm going to start with the boys. What do you feel is the difference between a problem and a pain? Traditionally, all sales methods are you go find the pain. I say no. Go find the problem. How do you guys differentiate?
Well, the problem, as we already said, is a blunt word. It's not really very descriptive. There's multiple elements to a problem. One of them we've talked quite a lot about is impact, and that impact is going to have impact on that person's business. So that impact could translate to business pain. Maybe they're losing money or losing reputation, but that impact also can translate to something that doesn't feel good for the individual, so personal impact. So that might be pain, but there's a whole other part of the problem, which is the root cause.
But even going back to your doctor's analogy, I go to the doctors with a headache. That's pain, okay? For me, that's a symptom, right? So I have pain. I've got a headache. I don't understand the problem yet. I don't understand the impact of the problem until I've diagnosed it. So the pain for me is it's a symptom. It's a symptom a problem might exist, but it doesn't define the problem. It doesn't define the impact, i.e. it's a brain tumor or a migraine. And it doesn't define, well, to determine if it's a brain tumor or a migraine. We've got to establish diagnosis and root cause as well. So there are different things. Pain is a symptom of a problem, but it could be a small problem or a big problem. You don't know.
Pain is what the customer tells you. Problem is what the customer can't tell you. That's what you have to figure out. I feel like that's the main
I like
difference.
that. I like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. What about you, Ted?
No, I like Brian's comment. That's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, that was good. I like that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that was great. So I agree with everybody said. I think you guys all did a great piece, and I think I'll end on this. Look, I think that's why sales has been stunted for a little while. And here at at Sales Guy, we're trying to push it out. When people go running around looking for pain, which all the other ones have tell you to do, and I will not use their names, you find the headache and you stop. That's why most salespeople sell the pill for $5 to $10. They got a headache and they got a bunch of pain. Their head is killing them. They can't see and they can't hear and they feel they want to vomit and they're stuck in a dark room. Like that's all the pain. They look at all these pains and they're done. They're done. No one's told them to say, well, wait, but why? Why is that happening? What's the impact? What's the real problem? Problem is I'm not, and notice that's the motivation, right, guys? Like, I can't get this proposal done. That's more motivation to me than the pain I'm having. I can't go to my kid's football game. I can't go to my daughter's wedding. Like if I can sit in bed all day long and wrap the covers over my head and put a pillow over my head, I'll pay $5 or $10, but I'm not paying $1,000 for that pill. I may pay $25, I may pay $100, but I ain't paying $1,000. But the minute I'm going to miss my daughter's wedding, here's $1,000. You can't take it fast enough.
Totally.
Right? And I love that. It's a great question and a great thought. It's pain does not drive enough value to get people to move. So, all right, parting shots, parting messages, go around the horn. We'll start with Ted, then go to Brian, then go to John, and Calum, you get to close the show. Parting thoughts.
Love the book, read it, listen to it, practice it. It's learn the game. It works.
Ryan?
Yeah, I will say, man, your book was recommended to me by my very best friend, who actually, unfortunately, he passed away somewhat recently. But all I can say is, like,
oh my God,
he was one of the best people I ever knew, and he was a hell of an athlete. And I have to tell you, man, like gap selling has changed my life, right? And how I sell. And, I will say, gap selling means so much to me because, it came from someone that was so close to me. And because of that, I feel, very close to you and the book as well. So I can't tell you how thankful I am for being on your first book club. I mean, it's so cool. I mean, I was looking forward to it when I got the email like Saturday morning or whenever it was. I just wanted the weekend to be over and for it to be Monday. So I'm so glad that I got to meet you, and this is awesome. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, dude. I just got the tremendous goosebumps. I am terribly, terribly sorry to hear about that. I mean, that's way, way too young. I'm terribly sorry. I don't even know what to say. I got the goosebumps. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And Tim's family.
Yeah, no, but I like I say, you're awesome, and this was a great experience. So I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
You got it, baby. You got it. Hit me up on the back end, and I'm going to get you a signed copy. All right, and we'll dedicate it to you, buddy.
That'd be awesome, man. That would be really cool.
Yeah, we'll do that. Boys.
I think we should leave that as the closing thought, to be honest.
Yeah, Brian's story was so touching.
Yeah.
I think we should leave it.
Yeah,
leave it with that.
Love the book, love the conversation with you guys, Brian, Ted, Emma's maybe disappeared, Keenan, but I think Brian's closing remarks were
beautiful.
Good
man.
Place to leave it, I think.
Yeah, beautiful.
Emotional.
Very. Very, very, very. Life is so precious, man. Every time I hear about young people losing it, it just freaks me out. I'm not as partial to old people because I'm getting old. I'm realizing, all right, we get old eventually, like I'm done. But young people, before you get to do it all, no, it's just not right. So, All right, with that, everybody, I want to thank you, Brian, for coming on and being open and sharing your wonderful story. Please reach out. I will get a book and I will sign it dedicated to your friend. What was his name or her name? Marcus McMorris. Okay, I think he
would have freaked out if he knew that I was on here with you. He would have lost it. He would have loved that. So I saw it on LinkedIn, and it was pretty. It was a brother. Which you commented on it. You commented on it, which was awesome. Which was really cool. It was super, super special because everyone, he cared about work so much. He was a true athlete, and everyone knew that he loved gap selling and that he loved you, and so that was awesome. Oh my God, fuck. Okay, yeah, we're gonna write something to Marcus. All right, and then Ted, thank you very much. And don't think I don't remember. Like, Ted, you're going to get us into that bank, okay? So we got to get with your CEO and get you in and get you guys doing this even better, all right?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Everybody listening, thank you very, very much. We're doing this again next Monday. I hope if I screwed up, don't be mad. I'm terrible at this, but we're going to do part 2 next week, chapters 7 through 11 or something like that. You think I'd get my act together. But anyways, this was fantastic. Thank you very much. A special, special thanks to my boys, Calum and John. I truly, truly have nothing but love for you guys. If I didn't do this, I'd still be your friend, drink with you. I really admire, respect, and enjoy you guys as people and professionals. One of the best times I had last year, a year before, was sitting with you in that hotel pub and just bullshitting for hours. So thank you for blessing us with your presence on this. Be good. Everybody, if you're not watching those two, start watching those two, Calum Kilgour and John Bissett. And until next time, everybody, I'm going to say, and this one is from Marcus. Peace. I'm out.